What a game, honestly. I was at Beaver Stadium witnessing this whole thing from near a bird's eye view. And Penn State fans, thank you for producing an awesome environment. My adrenaline was flowing. You know, it was so amazing, honestly. The noise, the crowd, the reactions to what different teams did. It was legendary, is the word for it. Beaver Stadium should be on any college football fan's bucket list to travel to. Anyway, though, let's get into this game, because this game is interesting. This game was basically old school style football. The score was 7-6 at the half. You heard that right. 7-6. It's what this game was. It was old school Big Ten style football. And I liked that it was close in retrospect because it just got my adrenaline moving. As a Michigan fan, let me tell you something. I hated that game. Hated it. We had so many opportunities to force Penn State fans to empty the stadium at the beginning of the fourth quarter. We didn't do it. And we'll get to this later. But that's mainly the only negative I have to say. You know, I hated how we couldn't put Penn State away. But again, Penn State is a good defense. Penn State, they do have good wide receivers, and, you know, they have a potent offense despite some of the play calling that I witnessed yesterday. But what I mean to say when I hated this game was just the lack of almost offense. Just punt. And you could tell that the crowd and both fan bases hated it. There were moments where it's like, what are these two coaches doing? Like the Penn State and Michigan fans were agreeing or almost arguing who was more incompetent today. It was interesting, to say the least. But, you know, honestly, in the end, Michigan was the better team. Michigan got into the red zone only once and scored a touchdown there. Penn State got into the red zone like 4 times. Yeah, 4 times. And, you know, one was a botched punt. Not a botched punt, a botched field goal fake. 2 were field goals. 1 was a touchdown. And then Penn State failed on a field goal outside the red zone. They got a field goal outside the red zone, and Michigan got 2 touchdowns from outside the red zone. Both passes. Cade had a good game, and same with Haskins. And we'll get to that a little later in my takeaways. But again, punt was the theme of this game. And before we get into my takeaways, I just want to say a little bit to Penn State fans. What are your thoughts on Franklin now? Tell me in the comments below. You're a Penn State fan, even if you're a Michigan fan, no matter who you are. Tell me down below, what is up with Franklin? What do you think of him now? Because clearly, he is Harbaugh. He is Penn State's Harbaugh. And he has a losing record against Jim Harbaugh now. He's only beat Ohio State once. And he might have a pretty poor record against MSU if he doesn't beat them this year. And it looks like Penn State could have a 7-5 regular season. It's really possible. So what do you think about James Franklin? Do you think he should be fired? Do you think he needs to be given another year or two because the 2022 recruiting class? What do you think? Tell me down below. And now, having said that, let's get into my takeaways. Mainly from a Michigan perspective, but we'll occasionally mention Penn State here. I'm mainly a Michigan fan. I love Big Ten football. There's only so many teams I have time to talk about, though, and I mainly focus on Michigan and Ohio State, but I like to touch on Michigan State, Nebraska, and Penn State. You know, schools with bigger fan bases, more interactive fan bases, and teams that, with the exception of Nebraska, have been pretty relevant. Nebraska just has an awesome fan base. But anyway, the positives for Michigan. We may not have the best pass rush in the country. I mean, Ohio State's I'd say is better. Georgia's is better. There's probably other teams. Duo-wise, though, Ojabo and Hutchinson are unmatched. Ojabo with, I think, 10 sacks on the season is pretty crazy. And then he has 5 forced fumbles as well. I mean, it's absolutely crazy what this kid has done. Ojabo, 10 sacks, 5 forced fumbles. Hutchinson, 9 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. This is according to ESPN. I hear that according to some other sources, Hutchinson does have an extra sack, I believe. But still, Ojabo can very well, because we still have 2 more games, very well break the 12 sack record for Michigan, sacks in a season, that was held by someone in the 90s. And Hutchinson might do it too. Both might set new records. It's amazing what these guys have done. And they pressured Clifford all day long. Clifford had some pretty long runs. He did. He had a long run of 18. He ended with 16 total rushing yards on the day with 16 carries. And that definitely does include, the sacks that he were bestowed upon him. It was horrible. I mean, and this, again, you have to credit Michigan's D-line and pass rush. You also have to credit Penn State's O-line, because they've been a weakness when it comes to the run. They were a weakness when it came to the pass in this game. Very much so. Clifford had some guys open. There were moments where I'm like, what is Michigan's defense doing? And in the end, Michigan's pass rush is like, you don't have enough time to throw to him. Boom. Sack, thrown away. Clifford coughed up the ball twice. Luckily, none of them were lost. But regardless, I mean, it was just it's absolutely crazy. 7 sacks for the Michigan Wolverines. 7 in one game. 12 tackles for loss. 3 passes defended, 4 QB hurries. That's insanity. And we're going to need that kind of play against Ohio State. And it'll, may not need it against Maryland, but it would be nice to see it more. So it would be nice to see that against Maryland too. So what a job by Aiden Hutchinson, David Ojabo, and, even by the linebackers and by safeties and cornerbacks, defensive backs. The entire defense did have themselves a day, even though I do have a concern for them, especially the pass defense. Outside of the pass rush, we shut down Dotson. He got 9 receptions for only 61 yards, and they did target him a few more times, though he wasn't schemed in as much as I thought he would be. Parker Washington also had 4 receptions, 92 yards. He burned us the most, but that's going to happen every once in a while. We weren't burned as much as I thought we were. Really, we were only burned like once on that 44-yard reception. Another positive is from the offense. Hassan Haskins and Cade McNamara had themselves a day. Hassan Haskins with 45 receiving yards, 9 yards average per reception, and he had 156 rushing yards. That right there combines to 201 total yards. 201. Absolutely crazy. And what a job by him. Blake Corum, I think, is out for the rest of the year, I heard. And Haskins is showing, and this is a good news for us, with Corum, who's the shiftier, speedier guy out, Haskins is showing, he has capability to break through on the outside, even break through up the middle. He's becoming shiftier and almost stronger as well. He's been developing nicely as a back throughout the year, and we're going to need him. He has had 31 carries. We just kept feeding him the ball. He hasn't fumbled once this year. Not once. So good job by him. And then Cade McNamara, listen, he coughed it up once. Our O-line was not playing the way it normally does. That was probably our worst O-line performance all year. Look, I know that Arnold Ebiketie is good. He had 2 of Penn State's 2 sacks, and he had half of their tackles for loss. He is elite. He's Penn State's best player on that defensive line, and he's actually a transfer too. So it does show that Penn State's coaching can get some things right. But Cade, outside of that fumble and a few throws where there were some miscommunications, and it's like, what are you doing? He had 217 passing yards for 3 touchdowns, an 82.3 QB rating, and I think like a 160 passer rating. Averaged 7.5 yards per pass, 19 out of 29. So basically, every 3 pass attempts, he completed 2 of them. He had a good game. He had a great game outside of just some small errors. And now he has a 6-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. He just doesn't make mistakes that cost you the game. He doesn't necessarily always win you games, but he won us this game with that pass to Eric All. So overall, a win is a win, especially when it's in Beaver Stadium and against a Penn State team who, when healthy, and this team was healthier than they were against Illinois and Iowa, is not bad, and is actually above average or good. But there are some concerns, and one of them is the run game. Clifford really stopped running, I think because of when he got trapped in the pocket. We hit him enough times to where, there were times where he was struggling to get up. He looked hurt, but he played through it, and he's a trooper. I know he made some bad decisions and didn't necessarily have his best game plan handed to him, and all that stuff. But look, he's playing against one of the best pass rushes in the country. Our pass defense, I would say, is probably one of the best, if not the best, that he has faced outside of a healthy Iowa pass defense. So, look, there's only so much he could have done. And the run game was there as well. But back to what I was wanting to say. The run game was there for Penn State, and that's what was concerning. In the end, it was Penn State's poor play calling and execution that held them back. But Kevon Lee, we let Penn State's 2 backs of Lovett and Lee run for over 4 yards a carry. That's not a good recipe for success when you look ahead to, Ohio State, who, despite being pass-heavy and stubborn with the pass, much like Penn State was at moments, which I think will play to our advantage, still, they can run the football. Mayan Williams, Trevion Henderson, even Master Teague, they are no joke, unlike Penn State's run game. Penn State's run game, their O-line, they had offensive linemen who were projected to be, top draft picks. That's not going to happen now after this O-line allowed 7 sacks, 12 tackles for loss. You get the point. Clifford still made our rush defense look bad. Lee made our rush defense look bad at times. We allowed over 100 rushing yards a game to a team who couldn't rush for 100 against Illinois and against Iowa, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong down below. And against Ohio State. Our rush defense, our pass defense is really good. I'd say our rush defense is still pretty good. It's not good enough looking at the big red O who is approaching us. It's not even 2 weeks until that game. It's only 13 days. 13 days until this team has a chance to truly prove itself on likely a national stage, barring Ohio State beats Michigan State. The D-line did have a tough time against the run game, but again, that pass rush really helps. The pass rush combined with Penn State's poor O-line really neutered Clifford's run game, especially in that second half. Another concern is the rhythm of the offense. Listen, our offense is good at executing, I would say. The issue is, I would say, part of its execution, a lot of it is also game plan. Michigan and other teams can have an inferior game plan and execute better than the opposing team. But in the end, I would say game plan and execution, they matter a lot. But in the modern era of college football, running a modern offense is so important. It is absolutely important. There were moments where Michigan was cluelessly running up the middle. And now we understand why, because Hassan Haskins in the end, he just wore down Penn State's D-line. But still, McNamara missing some throws. There were plays where we were designed throwing like 2 or 3 yard passes. We don't have a modern offense. And I think even Eric All's reception for a touchdown proves that, because that was barely over the line of scrimmage. That looked, from what I could see, looked like probably a mesh concept. And it was because Penn State's defense, who supposedly, and I thought was really good at defending the pass, really good safeties, linebackers, they couldn't cover Eric All, which still boggles my mind. And then it looked like he was going to be stopped, and in the end, he was fast enough where he got to the end zone. It was a very clutch play by him. He led in receiving yards with 64. But the offense is not modern, and it shows in the play-by-play. You check out the play-by-play, and listen, Penn State field goal, Michigan punt, Penn State fumble. They got in the red zone. It was a botched fake field goal. I don't even know why Franklin did that. That, it could have been 21-20, and if Stout made the other field goal, Penn State, theoretically by points alone, would have won. But anyway, field goal, punt, fumble, then another Michigan punt, a Penn State punt, a touchdown, which was a 90-yard drive, Penn State punt, Michigan turnover on downs. In retrospect, he should have ran up the middle, not doing an outside run, because there were some gaps up the middle where he should have punted it. Field goal by Penn State, Michigan end of half, Michigan touchdown after the half, Penn State punt, Michigan punt, Penn State missed field goal. That was a sight to behold. Michigan punt, Penn State punt. After that missed field goal, it made me so mad that we had 2 punts after that. That is ridiculous. That is so ridiculous. An opponent misses a field goal against Ohio State, take Nebraska, for example. Watching Penn State play reminded me so much of Nebraska. It was like Nebraska against Ohio State. Not that I want to compare Michigan to Ohio State, but Penn State's defense had our offense in the bag at so many moments. It's the same thing with Ohio State and Nebraska. Nebraska's defense had Ohio State in their hands, but Nebraska's offense, and in turn Penn State's offense, couldn't capitalize enough. We just unbelievable. Really unbelievable, honestly. And couldn't capitalize. We couldn't shut them out. And by shut them out, I mean we couldn't, go up by double digits beginning of the fourth. And in the end, they got a touchdown. We fumbled. They kicked a field goal. And we finally came back and came in clutch time. But still, this is another game where we won in a game of inches and didn't take an opportunity to turn this into a game of miles and, put Penn State out early. That's my criticisms, and that's really my entire takeaway from this game. I loved watching it again from that upper deck. And, this game really determined who is going to have better job security entering next year or entering this offseason. I hate to say it, but if Jim Harbaugh loses to OSU because of this win, he might get extended, and I won't like that. And Penn State, by losing this game, James Franklin doesn't have the same leverage he does. This is Penn State's first 4-loss regular season since 2015. If you exclude, of course, the 2020 season, which I'm kind of going to in this instance, because this Penn State team is much better than the 2020 team, and the record isn't exactly showing it. That is what's wrong with Penn State. So Franklin, does not look as good as he did before this year. Jim Harbaugh is just same old Jim Harbaugh until he beats Ohio State. I'm not saying he doesn't look as good or not. And honestly, I didn't think that Penn State would finish 7-5 after they beat Wisconsin. That was my original prediction. Michigan 8-4, which they've surpassed permanently. Penn State 7-5 regular season predictions, which they still have yet to pass. So it's just interesting to me. And that's all I have to say for this video. If you liked it, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and comment your thoughts down below. Again, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and comment your thoughts down below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you around.